you just got one of the biggest pay raises you've ever received, unless you don't want it. You haven't gotten one in more than 10 years. More than 10 years. And we got you a big one. I got you a big one. They had plenty of people that came up. They said, you know, we could make it smaller. We could make it 3%. We could make it 2%. We could make it 4%. I said, no, make it 10%. Make it more than 10%. Because it's been a long time. It's been more than 10 years.
That was President Trump taking credit for giving troops a pay raise for the first time in 10 years. Except that is not true. Service members get a pay raise every year. The last time they did not get a pay raise was in 1983, and that was because of a technical glitch. That's just one example of President Trump misleading the public in 2018. It's a thing that has happened, and as the year comes to a close, NBC News has taken a look back on the 10 biggest falsehoods we heard from President Trump. Yamiche Alcindor and Ginger Gibson are back with me. So Jane Tim put this together, guys. She is somebody who has been following the president's fact checks and been doing that since the campaign. So it's been a long couple of years for her because there's been plenty to talk about, right? So let's talk about a little bit of what we've heard from the president that turned out to simply not be true. Watch.
We've accomplished an economic turnaround of historic proportions. You know, and under the Obama plan, you could separate children. They never did anything about that. Nobody talks about that. But under President Obama, they separated children from the parents. How long has this witch hunt gone on? It's gone on for what? I think we've wasted enough time on this witch hunt.
Okay, let's pick one to start with, and let's start with witch hunt, right? Because the Russia investigation, while the president wants to say it's a witch hunt, has resulted so far in 33 people being charged with crimes and 3 senior former Trump associates convicted.
Mike Flynn, the president's personal lawyer, Mike Flynn, the former national security advisor. There are so many Michaels.
Michael Cohen,
the personal lawyer, and then the former campaign chairman, Paul Manafort. These are not just people around Trump. These are people that were the closest to the president, who were running his day-to-day operations, who knew and were close to his finances. So I think that this is not at all a witch hunt. And what Robert Mueller is showing, even with Roger Stone now possibly getting indicted soon, he's showing that he has real firepower behind this investigation, and that the president possibly should be worried.
There's also another fact check that seems to be particularly timely this morning as it relates to the border wall. President said on Fox News in 2018, we'll read it here, that we're building the wall as we speak. He tweeted Monday night, we're already building and renovating many miles of walls, some complete. He talked, too, when he was overseas in Iraq, about going to visit this groundbreaking of the border wall, Yamiche, as you referenced earlier in the show. Here's the deal. The government is currently repairing and replacing old sections of border fencing, but construction on a new section of border barrier has not yet begun and will not this year.
He's got prototypes being built, so he went and looked at like a let's test and see how we can build a piece of wall, but it's not actually a wall. It's like a little toy version of a wall. I think that he is trying to just see what sticks, and if someone believes him, he sees it as a winner. There, in Donald Trump's mind, it seems no downside to telling lies. There's no downside to saying that he's built a wall that he hasn't built. There's no downside to saying he gave people a pay raise that he hasn't given them. That one seems particularly difficult since people are going to look at their paychecks and know what's there and what isn't.
Well, and the people who we're talking to know what they're getting paid in that instance.
I think there's that. I think I want to go back to the child separation falsehood, because I think that's a big one. I've interviewed people who were deported without their children, and that's a really, really big problem. There are children whose parents are still not reunited. So you have children who have essentially been orphaned, in the practical sense, by the American government. That's a big issue and a big problem. And now we have children passing away and dying in federal custody. That's going to be a falsehood that's going to carry into 2019, and it has real impacts in children's lives.
And a lot of these will, Yamiche, but let me pull back for a second with some real talk here, because there are folks in this country who look at this and go, God, this is Donald Trump and the media attacking him. This is another example of how much the mainstream media hates President Trump because he's doing good things for the country. There are those in the White House who will say, why don't you talk about the things that he says that are true, right? Explain why it's important to call the president out, Ginger, when he says things that are not true, demonstrably and factually.
It's not an accident that they say those things after he says things that are untrue. This is not just some coincidence that they're accusing the press of attacking him after he says lies. This is a design, not a flaw in their process. And I think it is important for us to say when he's not telling the truth, because if we don't, then who does? If we're not acting as arbiters of what is true and what isn't, then there's no one left to arbiters of what is true and what isn't. It is our duty and our responsibility to do so. And you're right, we should not light our hair on fire and run down Pennsylvania Avenue every time he tells a lie, but we should say this isn't true and this is why it's not true in a responsible manner.
And I always remind people, journalism is in the Constitution. It's our job as mandated, and we are bound. And the founders of this country had us in mind when they created America. So I think that we have to think about that as we point out falsehoods. We're doing, as you say, a duty to the American people, and it's our responsibility.
And that is a great note to end on. Yamiche, Ginger, thanks for hanging out for this past hour. Much appreciated.